The first thing I remember is the smell. Antiseptic, sharp, and cold. A smell that scrubs your memory clean. And mine was already a blank slate. I woke up in a hospital bed with my husband of 42 years, Richard, holding my hand and telling me with tears in his eyes that I'd run a red light. He said I'd T-boned a pickup truck, that it was a miracle anyone survived, and that I was lucky to only have a concussion and a few broken ribs. He told me it was my fault. But you know what's funny about a concussion that wipes your recent memory? You forget the lies people have told you. You also forget where you stored the dash cam footage that proves everything they're saying is one of them. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. My world came back to me in fragments, like a shattered teacup. A nurse's kind face, the jello on a lunch tray, the itchy blanket. At the center of it all was Richard, my handsome, dependable Richard. 68 years old, with a full head of silver hair he was so proud of, and eyes that I'd always thought were the color of a stormy sea. He was there every morning when I woke up, and every evening before I drifted off into a medicated sleep. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" he'd ask, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "Like my head is full of cotton balls," I'd say, or some variation of that. The truth was, I felt nothing. It's a terrifying sensation, not having a past. The doctors called it retrograde amnesia. They said it was common with head trauma and that my memories would likely return, maybe in trickles, maybe all at once. For those first few days, Richard was my memory. He'd fill in the gaps. He reminded me of our son David, who lived in Oregon with his wife and our 2 grandbabies. He showed me pictures of our Cocker Spaniel Daisy. He talked about our retirement, the garden I supposedly loved, the book club I ran on Wednesdays. He was painting a life for me, a comfortable, normal 65-year-old woman's life. And in this life, I was apparently getting a little forgetful, a little careless. "You were so excited about the car, Ellen," he told me one afternoon, his eyes filled with a pained sort of sympathy. "The dealership had just delivered it. You insisted on taking it for a spin by yourself, to get the feel of it, you said." The car. He said it was a brand new Volvo, my dream car, the one with all the safety features. It seemed an odd choice for me to have an accident in. "I asked you to wait for me," he continued, squeezing my hand. "I just wanted to finish my coffee. But you were impatient, like a kid with a new toy. You backed out of the driveway and, well, the police said you went right through the intersection down the block. The light was red for a full 5 seconds, they said." He shook his head, a gesture of profound disappointment and sorrow. I blame myself. I should have insisted. My heart ached for him, for the pain I had caused him. I felt a crushing weight of guilt. I had been reckless. I had been foolish. I had shattered our peaceful retirement. David called, his voice tight with worry, and I repeated Richard's story. Dad said I was just not paying attention. What else could I say? It was the only story I had. But as the fog in my head started to thin, tiny inconsistencies began to niggle at me. A nurse, a cheerful young woman named Brenda, popped in to check my vitals. "Your husband is just so devoted," she said, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "He's not left this hospital. Most folks have family come in shifts, but he insists on being the one here for you." "He's a good man," I said automatically. "Oh, I'm sure," she smiled. "But you tell him to go home and get some sleep. The other fellow's wife, she's been running herself ragged too. They're a few doors down." The pump hissed. I frowned. "The other fellow? From the truck?" "That's the one. Such a shame. He got it a lot worse than you did, poor dear. Multiple fractures. but his wife, Maria, she's a saint. That was the first little pebble in my shoe. Richard had told me the other driver had walked away with just a few scratches. He said it was a big, burly construction worker in a monster truck, and that he had been furious, screaming at me as they pulled me from the wreckage. He'd painted a picture of an intimidating, angry man. But Brenda's words suggested a far more serious outcome, and a wife that was just as worried as my own husband claimed to be. When I asked Richard about it later, he waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, I might have downplayed it a bit, honey. I didn't want you to worry. You have enough on your plate with your own recovery. The man's going to be fine, just a bit banged up. You know how those things get exaggerated." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just focus on getting better." I tried to. I really did. But the pebbles were starting to add up. David called again, and this time I asked him about my new car. "Were you there when I bought it, honey?"
"No, Mom," he said. "Dad handled all of that. He said it was a surprise for your anniversary. He wanted to get you the safest car on the market. Said he did a ton of research." "Why?" "An anniversary surprise?" Richard had said I'd insisted on going to the dealership and picking it out myself. Another small lie. Why would he bother to lie about something so insignificant? My brain was a jumble, a library with all the books thrown on the floor. I couldn't be sure of anything. Was I misremembering what he said? Or was he changing the details? And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner of confusion and guilt, he forgot who he was dealing with. Or rather, who I used to be before this accident. He forgot that for 35 years, I wasn't just a gardener or a book club host. I was a research librarian. My entire career was built on finding the one detail that didn't fit, the one source that contradicted the others. My mind might have been a mess, but the instincts were still there, buried under the fog. And they were screaming at me that the story Richard was telling me had pages missing. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The real breakthrough, if you can call it that, came from a get-well-soon card. It was from my best friend, Carol, who was on a cruise in Alaska and had just gotten the news. I'd been so isolated in the hospital, with Richard acting as the gatekeeper to my entire life, that I hadn't even thought about my friends. The card had a picture of a bald eagle on the front. Inside, Carol's familiar, loopy handwriting filled the space. "Ellen, my gosh, I just got off the ship and saw David's message. I am praying for you." The first thing I thought was, thank God Richard made her get that dash cam. He was so adamant about it after my fender bender last year. I hope the footage cleared you immediately. Can't wait to see you when I get back. Love, Carol. I must have read that paragraph 20 times. Thank God Richard made her get that dash cam. A dash cam. I folded the card, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't seen a phone or my purse since I'd woken up. Richard said they were at home, safe. He said there was no need for me to worry about anything but my recovery. All the calls I'd made had been on his phone, with him sitting right there. That evening, when he came in, I tried to act casual. My heart was thumping against my broken ribs. "Richard," I said, arranging my pillows, "my memory is so spotty. This is going to sound silly, but that new Volvo, did it have one of those little cameras in the windshield? A dash cam?" I watched his face for a split second, less than a heartbeat. His placid, concerned expression faltered. A flash of something cold and sharp moved in his eyes. It was there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. "A dash cam?" He laughed, a short, brittle sound. "No, sweetheart. Where did you get an idea like that? It was the basic model. No bells and whistles. We're retired, remember. We have to be sensible." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the hospital parking lot. "Besides, what good would it do? The police report was very clear. Multiple witnesses saw you run the light. A camera would just show the same thing." He turned back to me, his face once again a mask of gentle concern. "Ellen, you need to stop fixating on this. You need to accept what happened so you can heal and we can move on." Accept it? He wanted me to accept it. But Carol's note and the flicker in his eyes had ignited something in the fog of my mind, a stubborn, fiery spark of defiance.
He was lying. I didn't know why, and I didn't know how, but I knew with every fiber of my being that my sensible, dependable husband of 42 years was lying to me. The next day, I told Richard I wanted my purse. I said I needed my reading glasses and my lip balm. He brought it in, a lovely leather tote bag I didn't recognize. Inside were a new-looking wallet, a tube of chapstick, and a pair of drugstore reading glasses. My old, worn-in things were gone, but my keys were there. The key to our house, and a thick, heavy electronic fob with the Volvo logo on it. And attached to the same ring, a tiny, thumbnail-sized metal tag with the QR code and the words Cloud Connect Dashcam Services. I tucked it into the palm of my hand, my fingers closing around the cold metal. That little piece of metal was either going to prove me crazy or prove that my entire life was a lie. Getting out of that hospital became my single-minded mission. To do that, I had to become the woman Richard described, confused, remorseful, and utterly dependent on him. It was a role that chafed like a wool sweater on a sunburn, but I played it to the hilt. I was an Oscar-worthy frail old lady. I sighed with guilt when we talked about the accident. I nodded along meekly when he told the doctors I was having good days and bad days. I told my physical therapist that my only goal was to get home so my dear husband wouldn't have to spend so much time in this dreadful hospital waiting room. The linchpin of my plan, though, was Brenda, the cheerful nurse. I started engaging her in conversation, asking about her kids, her long hours. One afternoon, when Richard had gone down to the cafeteria to get a coffee, Brenda came in with my afternoon medication. "You look tired, Brenda," I said, my voice full of practiced sympathy. She sighed, handing me the little paper cup of pills. "It's just been a week. My oldest is applying to college, and my youngest decided to take up the drums. My house sounds like a rock concert in a library." I laughed. I remember those days. Then I leaned forward conspiratorially. "Can I ask you for a little favor? It's a bit silly." "Anything, Ellen, you know that." I held up the key fob with the little metal tag. "My husband, he's a dear, but he's taken over everything since the accident. He says my car didn't have a dash cam, but I found this tag on the key. My memory's still such a mess, and I'm just so confused. I don't even have my phone to scan this little, what do you call it, QR code?" I feigned helplessness. "A trick I learned is surprisingly effective when you're over 60. People expect you to be technologically inept. Sometimes it's best not to disappoint them." Brenda's brow furrowed. "He told you there wasn't one? That's strange, but sure, let's see what it says." She pulled out her phone, a sleek, modern rectangle that made me feel 100 years old. She scanned the code, and a website loaded on her screen. Cloud Connect. And right there on the screen was a login portal. The username field was pre-filled with an email address, rsterlinginvest@securemail.com. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't recognize it at all. It wasn't my email. It wasn't our shared family email. It was his, and a secret one at that. R. Sterling Invest. As in, investments? "It's a login page," she said, showing me the screen. "You need a password to access the videos. Do you know it?" I stared at the screen, my mind a complete blank. Of course I didn't know it. Richard had set it all up under a secret email address. The password reset hint was a single question. "What is your foundation?" My foundation? What on earth did that mean? The foundation of our house? The brand of makeup I wore in the 70s? It was impossibly vague. It was meant to be known only by him. I don't remember," I whispered. And for once, it was the honest truth. "He must have set it up." Brenda gave me a sympathetic look. "Well, at least you know you have one. You can ask him for the password when you feel up to it." But I knew I could never ask him. Asking him would be tipping my hand. It would reveal that the confused, compliant Ellen was an act. He had built a digital cage around this secret just as surely as he'd built this false narrative of my incompetence. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the truth of what happened in that intersection was sitting behind that password screen. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I needed to find a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. I redoubled my efforts to get discharged. I aced my cognitive tests, reciting the date, the name of the president, and counting backward from 100 by sevens. I walked the halls with the physical therapist until my ribs screamed and smiled the whole time. 2 days later, the doctor, convinced of my remarkable recovery, signed my discharge papers. The drive home was surreal. Richard pointed out landmarks, narrating my own life back to me. "That's the grocery store where you get the good tomatoes," he'd say. "And there's the library you used to work at before you retired." He was affable, charming, the perfect doting husband. As we turned onto our street, he slowed the car. "That's the intersection, Ellen." His voice dropped. I looked. It was just an ordinary crossroads with the stoplight swaying in the breeze. There were still faint police markings on the pavement. I felt nothing. No flash of memory, no jolt of recognition, just a cold, empty dread. "Don't worry," he said, patting my hand. "It's over now. We'll get a new car. We'll move on." Our house, a lovely 2-story colonial I apparently adored, felt like a stranger's home. The furniture, the photos on the walls, the scent of lavender potpourri. None of it felt like mine. Richard had made everything perfect. Too perfect. The counters were clear, the mail was sorted into neat piles, and my favorite armchair had a new, unfamiliar Afghan draped over it. It felt staged. "Where's Daisy?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the tidy space. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, his face a mask of sadness. "I didn't want to tell you in the hospital. She was so agitated with you gone. I asked our neighbors, the Hendersons, to look after her for a few weeks, just until you're settled." He sent my dog away, my Cocker Spaniel, my Shadow. He had systematically removed every piece of my normal life. The car, my purse, my phone, and now my dog. I was living in his world now, by his rules. That night, I waited until the sound of his light snoring drifted from the master bedroom. I crept out of my guest room bed. He'd insisted I sleep in there for a while so he wouldn't disturb my rest, and began my search. I needed a computer. I needed my computer. I checked my small office first. My old desktop computer was there, but the tower was gone. Only the monitor and keyboard remained. "Sent it out to be Surface," he told me earlier. "It was running so low I figured I'd get it tuned up for you as a welcome home gift." Another lie. He was too thorough. My old laptop was my only hope. It was a 5-year-old MacBook, my lifeline to the world. Where would he hide something he didn't want me to find? I thought about the man I was married to for 42 years. He was meticulous, organized, but not terribly creative. He liked to put things in boxes and put them away. Attic or basement? I chose the attic. It was dusty and hot, filled with holiday decorations and boxes of our son's old school projects. In the farthest corner, tucked behind a stack of steamer trunks we hadn't opened in 20 years, was a black canvas computer bag. My bag. I carried it back down to the guest room, my hands shaking. I felt like a spy in my own home. I sat on the edge of the bed, plugged it in, and lifted the screen. The old machine chimed to life, a sound I suddenly realized I had desperately missed. It was a piece of my real, uncurated life. The battery was dead, but the power cord worked its magic. The screen lit up. There was no password on it. I'd never seen the need. And my email program, blessedly, was still open, just as I'd left it. My inbox started to populate, dozens of messages flooding in from the past 2 weeks. Get well wishes, spam, newsletters, and then I saw it. An email from one day before the accident.
It was from a man named Marcus Thorne, Esquire. The subject line made the hair on my arms stand up. It read, "Our consultation. Documents attached for your review." My lawyer. I had consulted a lawyer a day before I lost my memory in a suspicious car accident, and I had absolutely no idea why. My hand hovered over the trackpad, my own reflection a ghostly image on the dark screen. Marcus Thorne, Esquire? The name was unfamiliar, but the ESQ part was as loud as a fire alarm in the dead quiet house. People like me, a retired librarian married to a retired sales manager, didn't have lawyers on retainer. We had a guy who did our wills 30 years ago and sent us a fruitcake at Christmas. This was different. This was active. This was consultation. My blood ran cold. I double-clicked the email. It was short and terrifyingly professional. Ellen, following up on our call yesterday, please find the preliminary report from Clearview Financials attached. As we discussed, the findings are significant. I've secured it with the password we agreed upon. Please review it at your earliest convenience and let me know when you would be available for a follow-up meeting to discuss our next steps. Regards, Marcus Thorne. An attachment? A password-protected document full of significant findings? A meeting to discuss next steps? This wasn't a will. This wasn't a property dispute. This felt like war plans. I clicked the download icon. The file appeared on my desktop. Clearview_sterling_prelim.pdf. I tried to open it. A small box popped up demanding a password. My mind raced. A password we agreed upon. A call the day before the accident. What could it have been? I tried the obvious things first. My maiden name, David's birthday, our anniversary, Daisy's name. Nothing. Each rejection was a small, sharp stab of frustration. Richard's snores from the next room seemed to mock me. I went back to the email program, my librarian instincts kicking into gear. Organize the data. Find the source. I typed Marcus Thorne into the search bar. One other email popped up from a week before the accident. The subject line was, "Confirming our consultation." My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it. Ellen, this is to confirm your phone consultation for Tuesday at 10 a.m. I will call you on the number you provided. For your security, the document portal I will be sending you will be password protected. When we spoke, you suggested using your mother's maiden name as the password. Is Fitzgerald, all lowercase, still acceptable? Regards, Marcus Thorne. Fitzgerald, my mother's name. A wave of relief washed over me so potent it left me dizzy. I had been smart. I had been careful. The woman I was before the accident, the woman I couldn't remember, she had been on to something. She had been taking steps. I went back to the document and typed Fitzgerald into the password box. I hit enter. The document unlocked. What I saw made the floor drop out from under me. It was a 20-page report from a forensic accounting firm, page after page of spreadsheets, bank statements, and wire transfer confirmations. It detailed in cold, hard numbers how Richard, my quiet, dependable Richard, who clipped coupons and complained about the price of gas, had spent the last 8 years systematically emptying our joint retirement accounts. He had been carefully siphoning money into a series of shell corporations with names like Sterling Futures LLC and Silver Tide Investments. I wasn't a financial expert, but I didn't need to be. The summary on the first page was brutally clear. Over $800,000. Gone. Transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part was the name listed as the co-owner and sole beneficiary of Sterling Futures LLC. It wasn't me. It wasn't our son David. It was a woman named Isabella Rossi. My marriage wasn't just broken. It was an elaborate fraud. The life he had so carefully painted for me since I'd woken up wasn't a comfort. It was a cage. I know this part is hard to hear, but it was important for me to see the whole ugly truth.
It was about to come out, and seeing it in black and white in this damning report was the first step. The shock was a physical thing. It was a cold weight in my stomach. Isabella Rossi! Who was she? Was this some younger woman? Had our entire retirement, our 42 years of marriage, been a lie to fund his second life? The invest in his secret email address, rsterlinginvest@securemail.com, suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. The accident. It couldn't have been a coincidence. I get a report exposing him as a thief and an adulterer on a Tuesday morning, and on Wednesday afternoon I have a convenient memory-wiping car accident where he controls the entire narrative? No! My husband hadn't just lied to me, he had tried to silence me. Whether he intended to kill me or just scramble my brains, I didn't know, but the intent was there. He needed me out of the picture before I could act on the information in this report.
A surge of pure, unadulterated rage cleared the fog in my head for good. The fear, the confusion, the guilt, it all burned away. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman with a mission. The answer was on that dash cam, and I was going to get it. What is your foundation? The password hint mocked me from the Cloud Connect login screen on my phone's browser, which I had propped next to the laptop. I had been thinking about our marriage, our shared life. That was a dead end. I had to think like him. What was his foundation? It wasn't me. It wasn't our family. It was the money, the secret life, the plan he had built for himself with Isabella Rossi, his sterling futures. I tried that. Sterling futures? No. Isabella? No. Cayman Islands? No. I leaned back, taking a deep breath. A librarian doesn't just look at the book's title. She looks at the bibliography. She looks at the footnotes. I went back to the forensic accountant's report, scrolling through the pages, looking for the very beginning of the scheme. There it was, on page 12. The first major transfer to a shell corporation wasn't from our retirement savings. It was from a private loan account. The report noted that the seed money, a sum of $75,000 8 years ago, came from a second mortgage taken out on our primary residence. Our home! Our home! He had taken out a secret loan against the house I loved, the house where we'd raised our son. I felt another fresh wave of betrayal. He was always so proud of that house. He'd helped a small crew build it back in 1979, the year David was born. He was so smug about the construction, always bragging about its quality. "This place is solid as a rock," he used to say, slapping a wall. "We have a good foundation. That's the most important thing." The memory came back in a flash. It wasn't my memory of the accident, but it was a memory of him. Him, standing on the building site, arms crossed, talking to the contractor. He was so proud of the concrete work. "Bedrock concrete," he'd said to me, grinning. "Best in the state. That's the company name. You can't build a future on a shaky foundation, Ellen." My fingers flew to the keyboard. His foundation wasn't the marriage. It was the house. It was the original asset he'd leveraged to start his fraud, the symbol of his duplicity. The company was Bedrock. The year was 1979. I went back to the login page on my phone. My thumb was shaking so much I could barely type. Email, rsterling.invest@securemail.com. Password, Bedrock79. I tapped the login button. It processed for a second, and then the screen changed. It wasn't a rejection. It was a file directory, a list of video files organized by date.
2025, 10:10, 2025, 10:11, 2025, 10:12. My heart felt like it was going to burst through my chest. I scrolled down to the day of the accident. There were dozens of small files, one for every time the car started and stopped. And then, near the bottom, I saw one highlighted in red. The label read, Event 1432, Heartbreaking, Impact Detected. This was it. The truth. The last few minutes of my old life sitting on a server somewhere in the cloud waiting for me. I took a deep, shuddering breath, listening for any sound from Richard's room. Nothing but the soft rhythm of his snores, the breathing of a man who thought all his secrets were safe. I tapped the play button. The small screen of my phone flickered to life. The video was time-stamped and shot in crystal clear HD, the lens offering a wide panoramic view from behind the windshield of my new Volvo. The image was of my own driveway, with our perfectly manicured lawn and the rose bushes I supposedly adored framing the shot. Then I heard his voice, Richard's. Low and calm, but with an undercurrent I could now identify as sickeningly false. He was saying, "See? I told you it was brilliant. It's called pilot assist. You barely have to do a thing. It's for traffic jams mostly, but it works fine here. I've already set the destination to the post office and back, just to test it out." I heard my own voice then, a stranger's voice, full of giddy, childlike excitement I barely recognized. "Oh, Richie, this is incredible. It feels like something out of the Jetsons. So I just press the go paddle?" "Just tap it," Richard's voice coached. "The car will take over. It will accelerate smoothly, and it will automatically brake at the end of the driveway before you pull into the street. It's a safety feature. It won't let you pull out into traffic if the sensor detects an obstacle or the curb. See the little green steering wheel on the dashboard? That means it's engaged. Go on, give it a try." Then I saw the passenger side door open and close. He was out of the car. My own hands, complete with the familiar silver rings I had always worn, came into the frame, gripping the steering wheel. I saw myself tap the accelerator. The Volvo rolled forward, smoothly and silently, just as he'd said. It was magical. The end of the driveway and the street beyond grew closer. I watched, my hands resting lightly on the wheel, my foot hovering near the brake paddle out of pure old-fashioned habit. The car approached the curb, and it didn't slow down. Richie," my voice in the video said, a tremor of uncertainty in it. The green steering wheel icon on the dashboard blinked once, then disappeared. The car didn't just fail to slow down, it accelerated sharply. My own gasp echoed from the phone's tiny speaker. In the video, I saw my own hands frantically grip the wheel. My foot, which he had told me I wouldn't need, slammed down on the brake pedal. There was a horrible, high-pitched grinding sound, the sound of a brand new, top-of-the-line braking system completely failing to engage. The car shot out of the driveway and directly into the intersection. To the left, the stoplight was a brilliant, accusing red. To the right, the grille of a blue Ford F-150 filled the entire frame, a wall of chrome and steel moving at impossible speed. The last thing the video recorded was my own scream, cut short by the gut-wrenching, explosive sound of metal tearing into metal. The screen went black. I sat there in the silent guest room of my own house, staring at the dark screen. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart and the gentle snoring of my would-be murderer in their room next door. There was no ambiguity. There was no room for interpretation.
He hadn't just lied. He had programmed my car to kill me and passed it off as a test drive of a fancy new feature. He had manipulated the car, sabotaged the brakes or the computer that controlled them, and then stood safely on the lawn to watch me drive into a death trap he had set. He had tried to murder me for money. My husband of 42 years, the father of my son. The love I thought I'd lost to amnesia wasn't just gone. It had been cauterized, burned out of me by the white-hot rage that now flooded my veins. There was no grief, no sorrow, just a terrifyingly calm, diamond-hard clarity. He hadn't erased my memory. He'd erased the woman who would have ever forgiven him. My new life's mission wasn't recovery, it was retribution, and he was going to be so surprised by how good I was at it. Stick around, because this is where the fun really begins. My librarian skills kicked in. Preserve the evidence. My hands, now steady, moved with purpose. I found a USB cable in the computer bag, connected my phone to the laptop, and transferred the video file. I renamed it recipe_casserole.move. I then uploaded a copy to a new secret cloud storage account I created. I created a new secret email address. I emailed a copy of the video and a copy of the forensic accountant's report to my new secret email address. Redundancy was everything. By the time the first birds started chirping outside, I had a plan, a blueprint for justice. It would require me to continue my performance as the fragile, memory-impaired Ellen. It would require me to live under the same roof as the man who tried to kill me, to smile at him over breakfast, to let him help me up the stairs. The thought was nauseating, but the alternative, running to the police right now with my story, felt wrong, too messy. He was a master manipulator. He had already seeded the story of my carelessness. He would twist my sudden recovery of the truth into proof of my mental instability. I could see the headlines now. Confused grandmother accuses devoted husband. No, I couldn't just win. I had to annihilate his credibility, his freedom, and his precious Isabella. When he woke up, I was in the kitchen, fumbling with the coffee maker. "Let me help you with that, honey," he said, his voice syrupy with false concern. He came up behind me and put his hands on my shoulders. I had to use every ounce of self-control I possessed not to drive my elbow into his stomach. I flinched instead. "Oh, sorry," I said, pretending to be startled. "I'm still a bit jumpy." "Of course you are," he said, his hands lingering for a moment before he moved around me to operate the machine. "Just take it easy. Let me take care of you. That's what I'm here for." I watched his hands, the same hands that had typed in a setting on my car that was meant to be my death warrant, measured out the coffee grounds. "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice soft, and as I said it, I met his eyes, and I thought, "You have no idea what I'm about to do to you." Later that day, I told him I needed to go to the drugstore. "Just for a few things," I said. "Some fancy soap to make me feel better, maybe a magazine." He offered to go for me, of course, but I insisted. "I need to get out of the house, Richard, just for a little bit. I promise I'll be careful." He couldn't really refuse without looking controlling. He gave me a $20 bill and the keys to his sedan. I drove with exaggerated care, going 5 miles under the speed limit. My first stop was not the drugstore. It was a cheap prepaid cell phone from a convenience store, which I bought with cash. My second stop was the public library. It was strange walking into the place I'd worked for over 30 years, as if for the first time. But I wasn't there to reminisce. I went to a public computer terminal in a quiet corner, logged in as a guest, and used my new secret email address to contact Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne?"
This is Ellen Sterling. I have recovered from my accident. My memory of our consultation and the reason for it has returned. The situation has escalated significantly. I have new, urgent evidence related to both the financial matters and the accident itself, which I now know was not an accident. I cannot speak freely from my home. I must meet you in person as soon as possible. Your discretion is paramount. I hit send. Then I logged out, cleared the browser history, and walked out. I went to the drugstore, bought a bar of lavender soap and a copy of People magazine, and went home. When Richard opened the door for me, I handed him the change from his 20. He smiled, the picture of a loving, trusting husband, and all I could think about was the beautiful, intricate, and inescapable trap I was about to build for him. The first brick had just been laid. The reply from Marcus Thorne came within 2 hours. It was brief and to the point, just as I'd hoped. He gave me an address in a neighboring town and a time for the following afternoon. Come alone, the email ended. There was no question of that. Getting out of the house a second day in a row required another bit of acting. That morning, over the toast that Richard carefully buttered for me, I mentioned Carol, my friend from the cruise. I feel so bad, Richie, I sighed, picking at the crust of my bread. Carol's get well card mentioned her cat, Mittens, wasn't feeling well before she left. She's probably worried sick. I was thinking I should pop over and check on him. Her spare key is under the ceramic frog by her door. It would get me out of the house, and it would be a nice thing to do for her. He looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his stormy eyes. He was calculating. Was this a genuine act of a recovering woman trying to reclaim her life, or something else? That's very thoughtful of you, honey, he said slowly. But are you sure you're up for the drive? Carol's house is a good 20 minutes away. I'll be fine, I insisted, injecting a note of pathetic hopefulness into my voice. I'll take it slow, please. It would make me feel normal again. The normal card worked. Thwarting my attempt to feel normal would be cruel, uncharacteristic of the devoted husband role he was playing so perfectly. He relented, handing over the keys to his car with a final, "Call me if you feel dizzy. Just pull over and I'll come get you." I promised I would. Marcus Thorne's office was not the grand wood-paneled suite I had imagined. It was a small, discreet office on the second floor of a nondescript brick building, wedged between a dentist and an insurance agent. His name wasn't even on the main directory. A simple plaque on the door read, "Thorne and Associates." The man himself was as understated as his office. He was in his late 40s, with a sharp, intelligent face and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Mrs. Sterling, Ellen," he said, shaking my hand and gesturing to a chair. "Your email was alarming. Please, tell me everything." And I did. For the next hour, I laid it all out. I told him about my amnesia, about Richard's version of the accident, about the dash cam he claimed didn't exist, and the secret email account I'd discovered. I took out my new burner phone and, my hand trembling slightly, played the video for him. He watched the screen, his expression unreadable, as my own scream filled the quiet office, cut short by the sickening crunch of impact. When it was over, he was silent for a long moment. He looked not at me, but at the dark screen of the phone, as if seeing the ghost of what had happened. "My God," he said, his voice quiet but full of steel. He disabled the collision avoidance and braking systems and remotely turned off the pilot assist a second before impact. It's attempted murder, Ellen, calculated and premeditated. Hearing him say it so plainly, so clinically, made it terrifyingly real. Then I showed him the forensic accountant's report. His eyes scanned the summary page, taking in the $800,000 figure and the name, Isabella Rossi. He was liquidating your future. He probably assumed after the accident he'd have power of attorney.
He would have finished emptying the accounts, and by the time your son David figured things out, he and Ms. Rossi would be sipping daiquiris in a country with no extradition treaty. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen on a legal pad. The pieces were all clicking into place for him. "Okay," he said. "This is no longer a simple case of financial malfeasance. We have evidence of attempted murder, felony financial crimes, and large-scale fraud." He looked directly at me, his eyes sharp. "What do you want, Ellen?" The old Ellen, the one from 3 weeks ago, would have wanted her money back. She would have wanted a quiet divorce. She would have wanted to protect her son from the awful truth. But I wasn't her anymore.
"I want him to have nothing," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a block of ice. "I want him to lose the house he mortgaged behind my back. I want his girlfriend, whoever she is, to see him for the broke, pathetic criminal he is. I want our son to hear the truth from me, not from a police report. And then I want him to go to prison for a very, very long time. I want justice, Mr. Thorne. Biblical-level justice." A slow smile spread across Marcus Thorne's face. "I can work with that." His plan was brilliant. It was a multi-pronged attack designed not just to convict, but to utterly dismantle Richard's life. The first step was to separate the financial crimes from the attempted murder. It would be faster and cleaner. We would use the financial fraud to get him out of the house and freeze his assets, cutting him off from his escape plan before he even knew the noose was tightening. The following days were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. I continued my performance at home, becoming more and more myself every day, asking Richard to retell me stories of our past, forcing him to look me in the eye and lie about the life he had systematically destroyed. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but Marcus's plan was my mantra. We found Isabella Rossi. She wasn't some young bikini model. She was a 62-year-old widow who lived 2 towns over, a respectable-looking woman Richard had met through a grief counseling group after her husband died 5 years ago. He had told her he was a widower too, that his poor wife Ellen had succumbed to a long and terrible illness 2 years prior. He had been playing the long con with both of us. He'd used Isabella's trust and loneliness to make her the face of his shell corporations, probably promising her a golden, shared future. The day of the reckoning, a little over a week after my meeting with Thorne, was a perfectly beautiful autumn afternoon. I had suggested a walk in the park. As we strolled along the path, Richard's hand resting proprietorially on the small of my back, my phone rang. My real one, which Richard had so graciously found in my wrecked car and returned to me. I looked at the screen. It was my son, David. "Oh, it's David. Let me take this," I said, stepping a few feet away, but I put it on speakerphone, angling it just so Richard could hear. Mom, what is going on?" David's voice was frantic. "I just got a call from a lawyer named Thorne. He sent me some documents. Mom, is it true what he's saying Dad did?" Richard's head snapped up. His face went pale. He started walking towards me, his mask of concern crumbling. "David, honey, calm down," I said, my own voice perfectly steady. "I'm with your father now. Why don't you tell him what Mr. Thorne told you?" At that exact moment, 2 men in plain clothes who had been sitting on a park bench nearby stood up and started walking towards us. At the same time, from the other direction, a woman started walking briskly down the path. She was well-dressed, in her early 60s, with a confused and worried expression on her face. It was Isabella Rossi. Thorne had arranged for her to be there for a surprise meeting to finalize your travel plans. Richard froze. His head swiveled from me and my phone to the approaching men to the woman he had been deceiving for 5 years. His world was collapsing around him in a public park on a sunny Tuesday. "Ellen, what have you done?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Is that him? Is that Richard Sterling?" Isabella's voice called out. The approaching men were now clearly identifiable as police detectives. It all happened very fast then. Isabella realized who I was, the dead wife. David was still on the phone yelling, "Dad, what did you do?" And Detective Miller, as I soon learned his name was, stepped right in front of Richard.
Richard Sterling, the detective said, his voice calm but absolute, "You're under arrest for bank fraud and embezzlement." He hadn't even gotten to the attempted murder part yet. That, Thorne had explained, would come later. We would let him sit in a cell for the financial charges first. Let him think that was the worst of it. Richard stared at me, his eyes wild with a mixture of hate and pure disbelief. "You," he mouthed silently. I just smiled, a small, simple smile, the smile of a woman who remembered everything.
The aftermath was messy, but it was a cleansing mess. The story came out. Richard, denied bail because of the flight risk to the Caymans, could do nothing but watch as his secret world was exposed. Isabella, horrified and humiliated, became a key witness for the prosecution in exchange for immunity. My son, David, flew in, his heart broken, but his support for me, absolute. And a week later, armed with my testimony and the crystal-clear dashcam video of my would-be murder, the DA added the big charge: attempted murder in the first degree. Richard's carefully constructed world was gone. His money was gone, frozen in the Caymans. His girlfriend was gone. His freedom was gone. His foundation had turned out to be nothing but sand. He took a plea bargain: 40 years for the financial crimes and the attempted murder. He'll be over 100 if he ever sees the outside of a prison wall. The house was sold, and after settling the debts he'd hidden, I walked away with a respectable nest egg and my freedom. I bought a small, sunny condo, got my dog Daisy back from the neighbors, and started over. Sometimes I think about that woman who woke up in the hospital, the one with no memory. She was a blank slate, a victim. She was weak and confused. Richard was counting on that woman, but he was wrong. He didn't erase me. He just cleared away all the clutter, all the years of misguided affection and trust, and left behind the only thing that mattered: the foundation of the woman I am now. And she is stronger than he ever could have imagined. Thank you for following my story. It wasn't easy to share, but it was important. What would you do in my place? Let me know in the comments below.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.